Welcome back to the Danger Ranger podcast. This is episode 52, and we are here with Josh Warren, former 275 Ranger and owner and operator of Milsim West, the elite premier Milsim experience in the United States. Super excited to have you on. I've had, your cadre, some of my friends on in the past, and I've been meaning to get you on for a while, and I'm glad we've found the time to do so before the season picks up again and you start going out back to shooting BBs at people.
Yeah, you've caught me at the right time with that intro, man. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the exposure you've been given to some of the guys that work at Milsim West too. It's cool to see, them get their kind of background, their stories out there in the social media verse. It's cool for their professional development, and I always enjoy the opportunity to talk to other Rangers, both about Ranger stuff, and obviously about my entertainment business. So I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get into it. So, kind of your background, kind of some preface, I guess, for our viewers. Josh was a 275 Ranger kind of near the start of the GWOT, and he's the I don't want to call you old, um, but he's the old one of the older Rangers, the oldest Rangers I brought on the podcast. So it'll be kind of cool to explore the differences between kind of end of GWOT versus beginning of GWOT and kind of how Regiment has changed over the past, 20 years of freaking getting it in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. So I guess we can start kind of with your background, kind of how you grew up, and then kind of how you found your way into the Army, and then specifically Regiment.
Sure. Yeah. I think the easiest way to explain both kind of major topics of, I guess, my biographical information for purposes of the podcast, I'm on like two career paths here, right? And one was entertainment or theater, and the other was the Army. So my parents actually are theater people. They're both like postgraduate degree holders in technical theater and dance, respectively. So, super real scientific careers there. Uh, and they basically raised me working for them in a theater. They both worked at a university, and then they ran their own theater in the summers. That theater's still out there. It's in a town called Grand Lake, Colorado. The name of the theater, Rocky Mountain Repertory Theater. It's been around since 1968, where my parents met, fell in love, and got married working at that place alongside David Hasselhoff, if you know who that is. He still comes out and does benefit concerts for the theater still today. Other people who used to work for my parents run it. So they raised me age 5 to age 18, doing sets, lights, usher, ticket sales. Hey, we need another teenager who can sing and dance in Sound of Music, in, Fiddler on the Roof. Oh, hey, we need someone who can dance like a monkey and play a violin on a precarious piece of scenery that your dad built. Again, for Fiddler on the Roof, it's you. I was in that show like 6 times. And I just did that. That's pretty much what I did with my family, like all through growing up. Um, my dad was deeply involved in some Renaissance fair businesses for a long time. There's like an HBO special out now about all those people who started that stuff in the 70s. And my dad helped them build a bunch of the games and sets. But my parents worked basically in like make believe, right? Making stuff in the world of make believe. And I grew up working for them. But unlike everybody around me, I just really wanted to be in the military. I'd always felt a calling to be a soldier. I always thought that was something like really important that I needed to do on my man's journey through life. My father served in Vietnam. He won a Bronze Star there. His dad before him served in the European theater of World War II, won a Bronze Star there. Then they both went on and had very successful lives. I figured that was just something that you did. And so at 18, I joined the military with a Ranger contract, not really knowing at all what that was. You know what I mean?
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, like whenever I saw like my mom got me some books about it because she's always been very supportive, right? So she hates the military, hates guns, hates all that stuff, can't even watch violence in movies. But was like, okay, I'll get you like 17 different books about this thing you can read up on it, right? And all the illustrations with dude in like RI outfits or like Op 4 from Ranger Training Brigade or like that stuff. I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, black and gold, cool, cool. And then all the pictures of dudes from Regiment, I was like, red stuff, ew. I just didn't like it for whatever reason. Like I was like, that Ranger aesthetic sucks, right? The schoolhouse Ranger aesthetic, coolest. So I didn't know what it was, and I joined the military January 25th of 2001. So everything was going great, right? You know, young Bush is in charge. Nothing bad's happening. Everything is just, basic training was a breeze because I was super into it. I had been really involved in reenactment before I joined the army. It was the only way my super liberal parents would let me have a gun. I did Revolutionary War reenacting, so I had a flintlock musket. So that like
Drill, a lot of drill
after
and
hanging out with,
ceremony.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. But like I hung out with a lot of like weird old kind of boomer guys who've been in the military who like, you know, it wasn't enough. I wanted more, but that was all they'd really let me do. And they felt okay with it because it was like history facts, you know. And I'd be like,
Hmm.
"Huh, did you know that bayonets are triangular across the greater wounds?" You know, and my parents were like, "Okay, that's fine." You know, I don't like gun stuff as much. Spear stuff is fine. Um, so yeah, I joined the military. Basic was super easy. Uh, Airborne, obviously super easy. I went to RIP. I want to say we graduated in October, beginning of October. It was RIP class 1201. You know, so we must have started, I guess, right before the October change of the fiscal year. Um, and I graduated at the end of October. And my third day of RIP was 9/11. So that was kind of interesting.
That's wild.
And a lot of people, I actually just found some pictures in my office of the graduation for that class, which is pretty cool. Just because my mom had them like stashed away somewhere.
Hmm.
But you know, that was pretty wild, man. I mean, honestly, I don't know what else to say about it. Obviously, you know, the attack started early in the morning. Like everybody knows the story, except I was in the RIP compound.
Yeah, you
And
have
by like
nothing, nothing in there. It's prison, basically.
well, but no, no, yeah, but it was a little different. I don't know how they do it now, but back then it was like you did have time off in the
Hmm.
evenings and you could go out on post and stuff only when you were back in garrison. So it was like the first 3 days we're getting ready to go Coal Range, right?
Yep.
So I did go watch the news like at the bowling alley or some shit later that night.
Okay.
And the CQ desk was like showing people, you know, they had like it was playing. Um and then pretty soon people were like armed and guarding the compound and we were like, what the fuck? Like this, right, this is for real. Because an interesting aspect of that is when I got to second bat and had to be like staff duty runner, each company had to guard a gate. And so there were two privates, like, or a private and an E4 assigned to the barracks CQ who got 10 rounds. You had to sign for all 10 rounds. And you know what I mean? And you guarded the gate, which is pretty
Damn.
wild. Because from that point on, like, we were pulling guard on our own compounds with live ammunition. And considering I had not fired, no one had given me live ammunition since basic training. And like my second night at 275, they're like, all right, new bitches, like you're gonna be pulling gate guard tonight, right?
Here's an
And like
M9.
they give me a live, they give me 10 no, it was with our rifles, bro.
Oh
You had to
shit.
sign up 10 round. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're just pulling gate guard. There's like a Domino's and some fucking lady with her kids driving by, and you're out. I mean, you know, I was like, damn, this is serious. We're like European armies now, right? Like we stand, you know, we're gonna stand
Yeah.
out by the museum with long guns and shit. Um, but yeah, so I did, you know, I went through RIP. It was 3 weeks back then, right? Super short. I mean, you pretty much did the timed ruck out to Coal Range, and then everybody that didn't make it, they just cut them right there. But I'm sure it was the same. When I'm sure RIP does not change that much because it was like I think we had like 500 people in the pool when the class started, right? We did the PT test immediately. Some people got fucking removed. We went and did the 5 mile run immediately. People removed. Swim test removed. You know, right? Um, and then we're like basically packing to go to Coal Range the next day, and 9/11 happens. And it didn't really hit me until the next morning because they had a bunch of guys who had scrolls on their right shoulders come out. You know, everybody they could find in the battalion who had it, and they had a newspaper with the headline and each there were like maybe 3 or 4 dudes with combat scrolls that all
Mhm.
got up there and one I just remember one guy was like, don't be, I don't remember his exact words, right, but the crux of it was he was like, don't be confused about what you're here to do, right? uh you're going to kill or be killed. You're going to see people hurt. You might be hurt, you might die, right? You're going to think about the stuff that happens for the rest of your life. But if you, he said something like, but if, you know, if you're, he basically was like, if you were fucking kidding before, get the fuck out. And more than half the class just, that was it. All these people I'd known since basic training, all these motherfuckers who talk shit in basic training. Because honestly, dude, I was a theater kid by
Mhm.
force, right? I played hockey, I was a goalie, and I wanted to be a jock, but like my parents had other designs for me. And I worked in the family business, you know what I mean? Like they were cool enough to take me to hockey games, right?
Mhm.
So I appreciate that. But like pretty much, you know, my parents didn't give a fuck about sports. So, you know, you want me to put a spotlight on something, sure. So it was weird being in regiment where like everybody was basically a jock in high school. Everybody was all state, or their dad beat him while he got arrested. And it's like, oh, my parents just loved me and ran a creative business together. But yeah, but that hits me, you know. Anyway, it was a weird experience for me to see that there were all these people I'd known since basic who were like, you don't get it, bro, because you never played XYZ sport in high school. And me just being like, I don't know, man. I think you just like each day you got to fool yourself into being right. Like, I don't think it matters. I think you can be short if you don't quit. And all those motherfuckers quit.
Yep.
All those
Always the
motherfuckers.
loudest
There
ones.
was there was this dude that all the drill sergeants called Ranger. They called him Ranger Ronconi. His last name was Ronconi. And I actually had higher PT scores than him in basic, but they would never get down to the W's. They just get to their favorite, favorite coolest looking dude in the room and be like, oh, Ranger Ronconi, motherfucker quit. And I was just like, I knew it. I knew it. So I actually found it extremely motivating and frightening at the same time, right? Because I was like, oh, I know I'm a true believer. And then I later that day, I was like, oh, I'm one of the lucky ones. I mean, it made me excited because I felt like I got what I really, I remember. So I'll flip forward. Let's flip forward in the time frame here. I have like 3 or 4 months at battalion, right? I go do a couple shitty field exercises, which was really cool. That ended up being all the shit that I thought basic was going to be, right?
Mm.
Um, you know, my first demo range, dude, there was no demo in RIP, right? You just went
Right.
and did
Yeah.
call range, right? You got fucking crushed. And then basically they brought you back to the barracks. We spent a little bit of time learning how to fast rope, but you didn't have to do it that good. Like as long as you got to the bottom, they were like, all right, he's good, ship him out. And then we had to get our berets together. We had to learn Ranger history, right? And we had to play soccer against the cadre. And that was it. That was the whole thing in 3 weeks, brother. It was 21 days,
That's
right? So,
insane.
right, dude. So imagine my surprise, when I show up at 275, 4 days later, we fucking jumped into Yakima. Do you know what I mean? And I'm fucking walking around with live ammo to like patrol in and do some live fire exercise. Uh, you know, haven't shot a gun since basic in my life either. Other than a flintlock musket, which I can still get 3 shots off in a minute.
Hey.
Don't test me, but it's hard. It's hard. That's like max speed, no rammer, just whopping it down. Not that it matters, but so it was weird to get there, and then suddenly I was like, oh, this is what I thought the army was like. Was squad level shooting on flat ranges. You know what I mean? Squad leaders running their own individual groups on flat ranges. I didn't have to wear a helmet on a flat range if my squad leader said I didn't. Doing live fires all the time, jumping all the time, doing sometimes jumping and doing a live fire. Um, and then when we got told we were going to deploy in spring of 2002, I just remember because we were at an FRG party, right? And I'm like a private who's just being abused still. Because I'm the dumbest, loudest fucking private on the planet. So I go to 275, right? Somehow we have like a 5 day weekend. We get to the reception battalion on Fort Lewis. It's Fort Lewis back then.
Mhm.
We have a 5 day weekend. I get a bunch of my friends from RIP. One of them I'm still friends with. One of them I am still friends with. The rest of them all got RFS, like, you know,
As it goes.
with yeah, within the first year. We got the oldest guy among us who was like 31 to rent us all a car. We drove up to Vancouver, BC with our battalion sweat PT shirts on with the little scroll, which they told us not to wear anywhere off post. Like they had a rep come show up at reception. It was like, all right, we'll see you guys next week. Don't do anything stupid. Don't wear your PT gear off post to impress chicks. So we all go to Vancouver, BC. We're like down where it's all happening, partying all night, bar crawling, chatting up chicks everywhere. And then these dudes are like, hey, you guys are cool. Hey, we're in 275 too. What company are you guys in? And we're like, oh, I don't know. And they're like, oh. So it turns out that was all the personnel clerk for second bat. So when the bus pulls up the next morning, like me and but like the 4 dudes in my clique, we all get our bag smoked by the reception, like the fucking battalion personnel people. They smoke us in their offices, and then they smoke us for like an hour and a half, and then they tell us we're all getting RFS like immediately that day, and they're gonna have us call our parents and tell them we're getting kicked out of regiment So they make us like, but they're like, look, you're gonna cry. We know you're gonna cry. Some of you are already crying. So like, we want you to write out what you're gonna say so you don't fuck it up because you're gonna fuck it up because you're stupid, right? And then they just have us call the staff duty desk, right? And some guy just answers and goes, son, and then you just, mom, dad, I'm getting kicked out of the second regiment. Right. So they got us all like that. Then they took us over to the companies after everybody had already been like kickball picked. You know what I mean? They're like, here's the short fucking yapper with his four friends. Right. And then we all got picked like it was like the Special Olympics. Like, dude, me and my buddy Luis Castillo, who are like both 2'5'7" short kings, they're literally like it's us two and one normal sized man. And our fucking platoon sergeant is like, I'll take the two little ones if you want the regular guy. And like does a swap where he's like, if you give me two, I'll give you one. Anyway, so that's how I arrived. I got fucked up immediately from GO, obviously, squad leader. They used to fuck us up for things that were more garrison focused, which I understand doesn't exist anymore. You know,
Mm,
and obviously, I lived in a T hall barracks from like the 40s. So my living space was like, my team leader was in my room at 5:30 a.m. like fucking smoking me and writing a counseling statement because my sock drawer was fucked up. You know,
mhm.
just like, whoa, man. Like, hey, you're gonna fail us out there, Ranger, because your sock drawer is fucked up. And I'm like, bro, I'm desperately struggling to keep up on these runs. Like, what do you want? You know what I mean? Like, come on, man, who cares? I don't roll my socks. You should see my fucking silverware drawer. I just dump it in there. Come on. I'm just a gremlin, right? So it was interesting. I got disciplined a lot, but I did that. I did my first deployment as a private. Nothing really notable happened. Everybody got a blanket CIB award for being within 500 meters of gunfight, and we all came back to Fort Lewis with our CIBs and basically no real combat experience.
Mm.
Um, so we just told people we're not proud of what we did, when they asked, which was true. Uh, but don't worry, there's 4 more deployments. So yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, but pretty much that first deployment, it was like we fucking did this super long range insertion where we like flew into Bagram and then we like took 47s way up into the mountains. And then from there, we like landed on ridge lines and walked in over 5 days. And it was just a ball buster of patrol. And of course, we didn't find anybody.
Mhm.
Right. Um, so the mission set back then was very much like the kind of stuff we were practicing to do out in Yakima. We jump in, we do these super fucking long walks and surprise someone. And it always ended up to be someone like doing something totally innocuous and having a gun on them because it's Afghanistan,
Yep.
you know,
They're gonna
right?
have guns.
Right. Oh, dude, there was on one of my deployments, man, there was a squad leader who I looked up to very much at the time, and he recently retired from the army. And he said something like, if the CIA and JSOC had live feed on CNN of Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden having tea right now in fucking Times Square, we'd be an hour and 45 minutes too late. I swear to God. And he wasn't trying to be, you know what I mean? He was just being realistic. He was just like, we can't catch this dude on some kind of a timeline. Like, it's not going to
Yeah.
happen, you know? Um,
Well, that
so
was
anyway,
the
yeah,
that kind of era was when you guys were, I'm assuming you're patrolling near Pakistan, kind of the
mhm,
mountain regions, um,
yeah,
looking for
exactly.
fighters obviously coming to and from. Um, so basically just long movements to contact and then fucking rinse and repeat.
Right, exactly. And so I did that. It was like a 4-month deployment. Um, you know, came back, continued to be the most hated private in all of, third platoon, first, all of Charlie 3-1. You know what I mean? Just was the most hated private for a long time. And then at some point around, I've been there almost a year. They sent me to Ranger School finally. Uh, and I missed part of a deployment because I was Ranger School. I went to Ranger School class 0503. I was actually the enlisted leadership honor graduate for that class and was no longer Charlie 3-1's most hated private after that, which was kind of cool. Because
Nice.
all these motherfuckers that hated me were like, he's a gremlin. He never shuts up. We're like, damn. Um, so yeah, pretty much went to Ranger School, right? Learned a bunch of really cool stuff there about myself and how I interact with other people when we're doing something stressful, and without having to start from the social position of being like the loudmouth short guy everybody hated, right? Totally thrived in Ranger School. Really loved the experience. and was super grateful to Regiment and a combat deployment having just like really prepared. I felt very confident. Like probably by the third or fourth day, I was like, okay, I'm gonna crush this. Like this is gonna be easy. I get along well with people. I'm a yapper, you know. Uh, and so I had a good experience in Ranger School. Came back, finished out a deployment as TAD B4 saw gunner with Third Platoon Charlie Company for probably the last 2-3 months of the deployment. By that time, it changed to like long range vehicle missions,
Okay.
right? With direct action kit, where we'd hit these compounds. We'd drive out overnight. We drive under nods, hit these compounds, and we did that. That was a pretty. We were pretty busy that deployment. Suddenly, like we started doing more kind of the ground assault stuff that we did in Iraq, but we were doing it all around Gardez was where the
Okay.
deployment took place. Um, and that was really cool. Got a lot of cool experience on that deployment. Um, Not the worst deployment in terms of like combat action, but certainly there was some. So that was, I guess, obviously good and bad, but I think you understand what I mean.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, that's interesting. I've never
so
heard of, sorry to interrupt, but I've never heard of that kind of those kind of missions being done in Afghanistan outside of maybe south, like in the southern regions of Afghanistan, where it's a little less mountainous. But that's
yeah,
really interesting
so
to hear. Were you guys using
yeah, I
Humvee
mean,
or the
yeah, we were using Humvees. So okay, so this is pre IED,
mhm,
and this is it's got to be the summer of 2003, right? Because I
mhm.
graduated in April, so I get out there probably for the May, June, July, August part of the fighting season.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, that's what's going on, right? Uh, and the weird thing is the Iraq war has already kicked off,
Right.
right? The invasion's kicked off. Like I'm confused. I'm going to get my haircut, outside of the Gator Lounge at Florida Phase, and people are talking about Iraq, and I'm like, what?
What?
Because I'll tell you what, man, if you were in Ranger School and pre-Ranger, you know what I mean, for like 3 months in the lead up to the Iraq War, I don't want to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist with like weird shit taped all over my walls, which I am, but like you didn't even know, you know what I mean? I was confused. Like when I
Yeah.
came out of the Ranger School info vacuum, I was like, Jessica Lynch is a captive, and we're doing what? You know,
Right.
right? Pretty, pretty like honestly, pretty wild. That was such a strange change for me, just not seeing the whole build up to the Iraq war that happened in the
Hmm.
the corporate controlled media, right?
Hmm.
Um, they came up with the reasons for why we did it.
Right.
That you
I
know,
always do.
right? Yeah, right. I mean, but the reasons were the friends we made along the way, of course. Um,
Like we just want these
and
guys to have a really good time.
right. I mean, well, I don't, I mean, I don't worry about the politics of it, man, because that's not our, that's not why I
Right. That's not the
serve
job.
in the Ranger Regiment. Right. If you're concerned about the politics of America's, military dominance over the world, you probably shouldn't serve in the United States military. If that's something you see as being bad for your bottom line, I see it as good for my bottom line because I'm a fat piece of shit and I want to do whatever I want. So, it's always easier to get away with that by threatening other people. And that's always the easiest way to do it. It's way easier than like making them laugh or cajoling them or convincing them. I'm just being honest. I feel like that works the most effectively, but who knows? That's not the point of it. So the organization changed a lot, right, over the time I went there. Because it used to be like, I was getting scuffed up and doing all kinds of punishments for not having my spit shine shoes exactly spitted, my starches exactly starched, my socks in order, and my fucking personal shit, all those things. There were two authorized haircuts. Now, by the time I'm back from Ranger School, we're like not wearing Ranger PTs on deployment. We're not using the Ranger standard haircuts on deployment, right? Because our partner units that we've been working with were like, hey, can you stop make your guys dressing like Marines?
Yeah.
You know, and before the GWOT really kicked off, chicks in bars thought we were Marines.
Hmm.
Like we'd be like Rangers, they'd be like Marines with the short shorts, and we're like, no, 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 we're a
No,
highly trained.
we're
Yeah,
better.
right. But that's anybody, like in the '90s, early 2000s, when you said our military guys in short shorts with either shaved heads or a little fucking cooter patch on the top, everybody'd be like, oh, Marine Corps.
We're in, yeah.
Right, right. And so by the time I'm back from Ranger School, doing my third or my second combat deployment, right? That style's already changing. I get back from that deployment. One of my old squad leaders who hated me was suddenly leader of the Carl Gustav section and was like, "Hey, buddy, come be a team leader over here." And
It's a trap.
no, it was fine. It was actually cool because I learned a lot of stuff about, I guess, because there were a lot of things that he didn't do and he just let me do. I got a lot of confidence in like sort of running that whole group in his place quite frequently. And his predecessor after that was like totally happy with just letting me do that. Didn't mind at all. Even asked me to do things that really he should have done himself, but I didn't mind because I wanted to learn. And I was an E4. So yeah, I went to the AT section as an E4. Took over the gun 2 that would be attached to Second Platoon Charlie Company, and so then did my last 3 deployments with Second Platoon Charlie Company as the Gustav team leader. So usually be me and a gunner, and another guy. So my first deployment as a team leader was Winter Strike, which you may have heard of. It's
Yep.
like somewhat. There's been some media coverage about it. A lot of people talk about it, and it was one of the coolest deployments I've ever had. It's my favorite deployment, hands down. We did lose some people on the deployment, Jay Blessing notably, but it some of the experiences I had in terms of like sleeping in Afghan homes, eating with Afghans in their homes, really with Pashtuns,
Mhm.
that was wild. Never again in my life. There's an Afghan restaurant in town I still go to just because I'm like, dude, I can't believe I lived this life and like fucking slept in a living room with like 9 other dudes, in the far northeast corner of Afghanistan with some motherfucker that like probably would have fought us if had it. We were so early in the war, man. The Taliban were like back on their heels. You know what I mean? We were kind of chasing nobody around, and maybe just making more enemies by being heavy-handed about it. Quite honestly,
Mhm.
and that was the first deployment where somebody got killed by an IED, who was Jay Blessing. Um, and the battalion armorer Ray Fuller, who was a Korea and Vietnam vet, lost his arm in that same incident, which is crazy to think about. Just that he had been in Korea and Vietnam, and then as a civilian,
Wow.
as a civilian armorer, got lost an arm in an IED attack. So yeah, that's when obviously the IEDs came in. This is around 2003, and all the Winter Strike was just walking around in the fucking snow and mostly dealing with the weather and occasionally dealing with some militant Pashtu that still wanted to fight, but mostly dealing with just getting fucking snowed on. Going up to these villages where like they'd never even seen, they were like not even sure who the fuck we were, man. Some of these
Yeah.
places they were kind of
The
like,
Russians are back. No, no, no.
no, we're not Russians. No, there was a village. One of the main issues they had is they were like, okay, back in the 80s, you guys used to shoot at us with your helicopters. Please don't do that. And we had to explain, like, no, 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 that's not us. Like that was we're a different country.
They're
They're
not
like,
even
I
the
call
Soviet Union anymore.
no, yeah, I mean it was confusing, but it was really cool just to get to experience that so up close. And to be honest, that deployment was fucking worse than Ranger School because it was like
Oh yeah.
it was like a almost 3 week foot patrol with 18 hours of refit, followed by a 2 week foot patrol from November to October through December of that year. It was fucking brutal, man. And the sleeping in the snow, I mean, it was rough. Really broke me down. But probably the last 2 weeks of it, I just like survived by like just jerking off in my sleeping bag vigorously every night. Like when your sleeping bag's super cold when you first get in, I just get in that motherfucker and jerk off like because it warm it up, and then I'd be like, dude, if I fucking die out here, you know what I mean? Like after this miserable, stupid fucking because like honestly, by week 3, we were like, are we just doing this because Regiment's like, yeah, the boys are strong, it'll be good for them,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
It's like, oh, it's that old Ranger mentality. We're
It
just gonna do it.
absolutely was, man. But it was super cool. I wasn't really privy to the higher level planning stuff, obviously, because I was an E4 team leader. So, like, really didn't need
Homie
to
with a
be.
rocket launcher.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening. I was obviously near the PL frequently,
Yeah.
right? And I spent a lot of time with Christo May, who was killed in action on that deployment because he was the 60.
Yeah.
He was the FO. So
Okay.
him and the 60 and me would like all be in the same place all the time, pretty much. Um, So then I stayed as in that position through my last 2 deployments, which were both to Iraq uh, in 2004. So I went in the spring of 2004 and then came back for about a month and went for most of summer into the fall of 2004. And those were, I mean, that was like that was either short range rotary wing raid or short range armored, somewhat armored ground vehicle raid. And that's when I feel like I really finally got acquainted, with combat and people actually started dying. And I felt a little more fear, perhaps, it became a little more real for me that something could happen to me. Because it was happening to lots of people around me. So yeah, that and those deployments were pretty much all circling around Ramadi and Fallujah
Mhm.
all through the year of 2004, just like dealing with all the violence that was building up to a crescendo, right? Um, you know, let's see, things have changed a lot. I mean, we've pretty much gone away from patrolling all of a sudden, right? Wearing the old RBA, but like it was interesting. I got the RLCS modular kit like 3 months before we got back from that deployment, and then they gave me the kit with like 800 pieces, and I've been stringing together like, you know what I mean, like some old shit that somebody had from the 90s, the old Ranger rack, things I bought at Tac Taylor. We had like 50 million different avenues of supply to have the right pouches, because I had to carry the Vipers, my rangefinders, and I needed a pouch for that, and they didn't have the right pouches for my gunners, so we were like, and it was like I got that kit 3 months after that. I get back, I have 3 months left. I'm like, I'm not even opening this fucking bag, dude. Like, I'm just gonna turn this shit back in. Um, so I don't know. 2004, not a great year. I mean, not a terrible year. Like I learned a lot about myself, obviously, and how I react and how I feel. Um, it was weird because a lot of the raids we were doing were on like more wealthy people,
Okay.
and so there was a lot more English being spoken by the women and even the men during these raids. And so I really started thinking more about what we were actually doing, which was mostly busting into people's houses in front of their families, and either killing or taking the menfolk. Which, like, whatever, not as honorable and noble as what I thought being a soldier was when I was a child, but I totally get why it has to happen. Um, we found a bunch of money. Honestly, my best story is we found a bunch of money. All right, it's Nathan Stahl's lost gold, and then this is it for Ranger stories. Okay, so Nathan Stahl was my private. He got killed in Ramadi, September 22nd or 21st, depending on where you were in the world. The period of darkness between them in 2004, and he got killed by an IED complex ambush. We got set up by some local police or something who keyed their sirens as we drove by, and then we got ambushed. And it was like small arms and an IED. The IED basically blew the whole vehicle apart, deadlined it, killed him pretty much instantly. And we spent the rest of the night. We initially went out to help another group of CAG and our platoon that had gone to get some Pander vehicles from an airfield that had been ambushed on the return. We went out and got ambushed. It took basically all night to get everybody back out of the city. It was pretty wild. It was a wild evening. And will always remember my Ranger buddy that night, of course. But leading up to this, like 3 weeks before, we do this raid, right? On this super fucking nice house, big pool, several family houses on the compound, orchards. And there's a pool house. And in the pool house, there's this fat man with this safe in this room, right? And, you know, a bunch of teams are clearing through it. Me and my guys are the last ones in because we're the goose, right?
Right.
Uh, and everybody's kind of left the room and they're looking for something to blow the safe or get it open with. And I realized the safe is fucking open. It's just open, right? And Nathan's like manhandling this fat man who was whining like a pig, which was kind of interesting detail. And we realize it's open, dude. And there's $600,000 in that motherfucker. There's 5 bales that are solid 100,000s, and then there's another one that's been busted. The fat man's been getting into it. Do you get what I mean? So we all just start going to town on this money. And there's a lot of hijinks that happen, but basically, another team leader sees it, tells the PL. The PL gets there like seconds before the platoon sergeant shows up. The platoon sergeant's like super angry, right? The money gets taken. Me and the guys, we turn some in, but maybe we keep some, right? Um, it goes to a talk. They have to fly in a money counter. The money gets counted, and lo and behold, some money goes missing. Now, I didn't realize this. I was telling this story to someone later, and they're like, "Do you think your platoon sergeant who forced you to gamble with him also stole from you?" And I hadn't thought about it in like 19 years. And then somebody said that, and I was like,
Oh shit.
Motherfucker, that guy. Because here's how it goes down. His name, uh, so Star Nelson used to play, we play poker. He really liked everybody playing poker with him. And after the money gets taken, which had nothing to do with me and my dudes, right? Because like whatever we allegedly may have had on us was taken well before anything was counted. But some of it goes missing while it's in the talk.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
right, right. It was just CAD guys and officers in there. I don't know who would have taken it.
Yeah. Crazy.
Right. He basically comes to me and is like, "Look, dude, there's going to be an investigation. Everybody knows you and your guys have money, right? Like, just listen, bring it to me at Chow tomorrow. We'll never talk about it again." So I did. I went to my guys and was like, "Look, I'm not sure what they know, but just give me all the money." Wink, right? So I kept a little bit. I'm not sure what Nate might have kept. I'm not sure what the other private kept because he got RFS immediately after returning. Like we went back. He was supposed to go to Ranger School. He gets RFS. I don't know what happens to him after that. Um, that's it. Then I go turn the money in, and I realized 19 years later that I was an impressionable teenager, and that
Got
there was no
bamboozled.
investigation, and that my platoon sergeant literally just fucking knew I had the money, and that I had no poker face, and he fucking
Damn.
so Nathan Stahl had some. Do you know what I mean? He must have had some, and I don't know where it is. And I like to imagine maybe, one day some future generation of Milsim West cadre was like taking a shit, and he's like, "Man, this toilet's like uneven," and oh no, there's a bunch of fucking money stuff down here. But that's my coolest war story, man. That's really it. You know what I mean? That's the one that I have that I think is the most interesting, and it did make me think about like killing everybody in the room. It just like my first lizard brain thought was like
I
kill them
gotta have
all.
it all.
Yeah, yeah. And the more guys, like the more team leaders come into the room, the voice is like, he wants the precious, kill him. But so it did make me think, about, I don't know, the corrupting power of cash, I suppose. Um, but those are basically okay. So that's all the combat deployments. By the end, it's a bunch of raids. We don't even have the F armored vehicles we need. That's really why Nate Stahl got killed, right?
Mm.
He was
This is
sitting in
yeah,
the
this is
back of.
pre-strikers.
Oh yeah, I mean these weren't even armored Humvees, man. These were Humvees that we put an up armor kit on, and then
Sandbags and
we made these welded steel cages in the back, dude. Like Nate Stahl died basically in a welded steel box that we had made in country and put in the back for the assault teams. Right? They got 1 inch thick armor grade steel, and they made a box and they put it on the back of these things with like swing outdoors and a bench down the middle. And I mean, that didn't fare well against 3.155 rounds Daisy chained under the road.
I'll get you.
Yeah.
No.
Right. That didn't go so good. So I think a lot changed actually about the way we did ground assault after that.
Yeah.
Um, Both in that they got rid of the pander for whatever reasons. I mean, one of the panders was deadlined. You know what I mean? That's who we were going to help out.
Hmm.
So it's like, that's when we started. But I wasn't even there for that. I left. Do you get what I mean? Like that was it. I left in January of 2005. I was married. I got married while I was in, and she basically was like, "You got to get out. You're gonna die." I mean, not in necessarily, but that was kind of her take. And considering Nathan Stahl had just died that summer, Devin Pagaro had also died that summer from our 12-man AT section. That wasn't a crazy thing for her to say,
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I think I've had enough of this. I don't want any more of it. And I got out. And that's basically when I started getting into airsoft. So, uh, I guess we can talk more about the Ranger
Yeah,
differences.
just a few questions and we can move on. So
Yeah, sure.
you guys were operating, was it the whole company that was in Iraq? Kind of how did the
No, so the whole
deployment
company
break
would go
down?
in country, and then we would go to what we called platoon safe houses.
Okay.
And then in those safe houses, we would be attached to like either a group, like a SEAL platoon or a CAG squadron.
Yeah.
But I think they have platoons within their squadrons. I don't know a
They've
ton
like
about it.
teams. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we'd be attached to some smaller, very smallest element with our smallest element. So that part was insanely cool. And from what I understand, that's kind of how it goes now. Um,
More or less.
yeah, I mean, it was changing from like the first deployments we were doing. entire
Straight
company
Ranger.
clearance
Yeah.
movement to context. Right. Second deployment, we're doing the same thing, but basically with vehicles. We're starting to come into the like ground vehicle raid assault thing, but we're doing it over super long distances, you know, basing out of the city of Bagram, or I mean out of Gardez, and driving all up and down the corridor to hit compounds that like, are catching shipments. Um, but the distances were so long, whereas like when we were in Ramadi, we just drive out and go hit somewhere and then drive back to the base. Or, if we were at Bagram, we just hop on 60s, fly somewhere for 45 minutes, hit it, fly back.
Hmm.
Uh, whereas, I mean, we just go all night. Like when we were in Gardez, we'd leave for the whole night and we just have a list of stuff we were going to hit along the way. Or that we were going to go. This is one thing we did during those missions that I thought was particularly clever. When we would pass through other villages where there was signal intelligence, so they had like cell phone intercept teams out there. Um, they were developing a particular target in that village. We'd go and we would borrow uniform tops from this first ID unit that had a compound across the street from us. We would borrow their uniform tops and we would pull into these villages we were setting up for future raids, and we'd pretend we were lost, or we'd hand out candy or like school notebooks, just so they get used to us being there in the mornings. And then sometimes we'd flip the script on them. Like we'd go there and then they'd get the hit because the guy was calling to talk about us. And so several times we were able to basically catch the guy, totally, because we were just like, all right, who the fuck is using a cell phone? That's him. That's him. Like, right. Now you're in a foot race with 40 Rangers dressed like first ID guys. Uh, but it worked, man, because people
Yeah.
thought that we were like, they could tell the difference between us and regular troops. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So when we come by with a roll bar vehicle, everybody black flag, no rank, they could tell, like, okay, the secret police are here,
Yeah.
not like the friendly 82nd Airborne, trying to build a bridge for us. Like these guys just show up to fuck us up. So that was a notable part about that. And then the Iraq deployments, I think, is really when the unit started evolving into what it became. No one gave a
And
fuck about the garrison
working,
shit anymore.
yeah, working closely with, and I've worked with, tier one or whatever, SEALs, whatever. It is, you do have to kind of step up the game from the normal Ranger mentality of, the Ranger mentality is the only way I can describe it.
I thought it was. I mean, I thought it was awesome because I enjoy the Ranger mentality, and having grown up in theater, actually, that kind of mentality is what gets a production done. They have this saying, "The show must go on," right? Like my parents are like true believers to that. So it was kind of cool to see another organization based around a similar ethos, but obviously with a much different mission.
Right.
But I really enjoyed those last couple deployments because, CAG did a lot of training for us on driving, on shooting, on medical stuff. So that was really informative. Just getting to work with some of those guys and hearing about their backgrounds and how some of them were like, one of them was like a dude who was in the Coast Guard. There was a guy who'd been in the Marine Corps. There was a guy who'd been in SEAL Team 3 and then went to CAG because he was like, I got to go to the top of the top.
Hmm.
Um, so that was really cool. And the food got a lot better when we got to stay on their compound. Um, there was some other weirder stuff. There were some weirder things about that I guess really aren't that classified anymore. But like, I had more interaction with like detainees who were being detained by OGA, and they used Ranger privates as part of the interrogation process, and so that
Ooh,
was pretty interesting. And maybe the only time in my life where I was like, "Are we not
are we
not
back?
in when I was doing it?" But like 10 years later, I think I decided I didn't want to do World War II Waffen SS reenactment anymore because I thought that just like maybe they're the baddies and I should stop dressing up as them as a Jewish guy. And and then at the same time, I was like, oh, anyway, you know,
It's in the past.
fuck. Anyway, we just thought that guy wanted to hear Metallica 24/7 with the lights on, you know, more comfortable for him that way. Certainly not. Anyway, it was an interesting experience. I got to see what we were really doing. It did seem, I mean, I definitely saw a lot of mission success through, surprise, speed, and nonviolence. And for the first time, really heard CAD guys, especially, talk about, look, man, the mission is the HVT. Like, we don't, however, we achieve that, right? If we don't have to have a gunfight, even better. Whereas a lot of your Ranger officers and Ranger NCOs were like, hopefully, we have a badass gunfight. because this organization had existed for a decade, really, without any significant, more than that, really. I mean,
Mhm.
honestly, it wasn't
Yeah,
like
because
there
there
was
wasn't a whole lot of involvement in, in the 90s with the Gulf War. And then before that, it was Panama, which was 80s.
right.
So,
Right. And basically, I mean, my first three deployments really were relatively tame compared to a modern Ranger deployment.
mhm.
My last two were much what a modern Ranger deployment looks like. You show up, we do a fucking ton of, hour cordon and assault with tier one units. Um, I really only worked with blue in Afghanistan. Um, and when we were in Iraq, we only worked with green or with white, the British
SAS.
guys. That's what they call them. That's
Okay.
what they call. Those were the color coordinations then, but it changed all the time. They had different task force names, and that part was really cool to me. Basically, I got out for personal reasons, and within basically a year, I got back in as a ROTC cadet on a scholarship. Got divorced, started playing airsoft, and took an ROTC scholarship at Seattle University, where I met Brian Clarkson, my esteemed associate co-owner of Milsim West. And we worked for a business called BattleSim, and we produced kind of Milsim West game format, but with a fixed op fort and set in Vietnam or World War II. And we ran those games all the way from like 2005 when I got out, or 2006, the year after I got out and started going to school, all the way up until like 2011 when we started Milsim West, on and off. Um, Failed college, failed algebra three times. I actually did nothing in college. My GPA was a 0.07. I somehow made it all the way through all 4 years, just like fucking and partying, basically doing nothing. I was really more qualified than most of the cadre. I partied with some of the cadre. I knew which students the cadre were fucking. So no one really like checked me on how my grades were over on the academic side, right? Everything they sent me to in ROTC, I just aced honor grad at every fucking, oh great, you're going to, it's like their summer leadership course that you have to do to graduate is like it's like a 20-day ranger school with chicks and you get to sleep at night.
Yep.
So,
Wow.
I mean, and that's not no offense to females or anything. It just meant I couldn't do some of my best dick jokes in the patrol base. But
Crime.
yeah,
Absolute crime.
yeah, yeah, right. I know. Uh, so pretty much like I'm supposed to graduate in 3 weeks. I've already been selected as an infantry officer. Yes. And then like, my cadre are like, bro, you're not commissioning. And I'm like, why? And they're like, the university's kicking you out. And I'm like, for what? For what? I didn't do anything this time. I haven't had any parties. I've been good. And they're like, bro, your GPA is a 0.07, bro. Like you're out. So I could have gotten in a lot of trouble over that. They could have put me in the army for they could have put me in army jail for 4 years, 8 years E2 unpromotable, needs of the army. Pay back the entire scholarship was like $160,000 for a private Jesuit college in Seattle, or any one of those options. And the commander, I guess, despite not really liking me, just like gave me the pass, which I really appreciate, because 8 years or 4 years or $165,000 debt would have been rough. And it was rough for me, man, because I never really failed in anything in life.
Mm,
Um, while I'd been in college, my friend Chris May was killed overseas fighting with Ranger Regiment. I felt terrible about it. My entire, basically, my strong identity prior to that point was being part of the Warren family, the theater family that worked together, and being part of the Ranger Regiment. And I remember, I like the year that when I saw he died on the news, I was at this fucking job I got, the security guard job I got after I got kicked out of college that summer. And I was like so low. And I was like trying to eat some fucking lunch. And I see on the news in the break room of this like social security office I'm guarding that like my friend and comrade died in action. And I just thought I was the biggest piece of shit on the planet, because I wasn't there being part of it. And that was probably my worst failure, man. Um, I was in my late 20s at that point. You know what I mean? I couldn't really get relationships to work, but I just kept doing like 3 or 4 airsoft games a year with this team called Battle Sim, and they started getting popular. We'd have even almost 150 people show up at them. Whoa! And we'd fly out to different spots outside the Northwest. We'd do one in Connecticut. We were doing one in Virginia. We did one in Louisiana, and then we do one in Washington every year. And I just kept doing that. At one point, I like quit this job with the Federal Protective Service, the security at Social Security. The job I was working, I just quit. I hated it. I hated make like I wasn't having any fun. I moved into an airsoft arena, and that is where I started Milsim West, man. Um, at some point, I had been putting on like sort of war play games through airsoft for 6, 7 years at that point, and I'd really been playing war games with my friends my whole life. When I was doing reenactment when I was a kid and stuff.
Mhm.
And at some point in 2011, the airsoft arena I was working in and living in was like, hey, we're kind of slow in the summer because summer in the Pacific Northwest, everyone wants to be outside. So we should bring back the old team battle sim events we used to do. That'll be good. So me and Brian Clarkson, a bunch of other guys, brought back the team battle sim events. The owner got mad basically because the event was successful and we had like 300 people come, which was a huge event in 2011 in the Pacific Northwest, and basically like took back all the social media pages from us and shit, and like said we were trying to
Yeah,
steal his
poopy.
business. So the night of the event, like we had all the customers there and we had to come up with like a new brand name because we knew we wouldn't be able to use Team Battle Sim anymore because he owned that. And my vote was Squad Ops. Thank God we didn't do my vote. Uh, but that's where we came up with. My friend Marshall Smith came up with the name Milsom West, and that stuck. And basically, you know, that was the year that basically Brian and I became number one, and I stopped worrying about being somebody's loyal number two, which is really what I'd done all through Ranger Regiment. You know what I mean? And even to some degree, what I did in college instead of paying attention to what I was supposed to be doing. But mostly, I was just partying from like the post-war, post-divorce. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, you
I was
didn't
really
really get a chance to live your 20s, so it kind of came out later, early 20s there.
it's super, super. I mean, that's really what happened, right? It's like my late 20s, early 30s, I kind of went through that like adolescent phase, got really into airsoft, just said fuck everything else. Life's too short. I don't want to do shit that sucks. I don't want to work some fucking soul crushing job with a bunch of rent a cops who just want to shoot somebody. I don't want to shoot somebody. If I'm going to go back and be in regiment, great, let's do it. But like, that doesn't make me a man. That doesn't solve the problems of my failures in life, right? That's what I thought. As a young man, I thought you go become a warrior. The key is unlocked. You are now a man forever. Now that I'm a middle-aged man, I realize that is one small part of a huge picture of what it takes, to be the kind of man that I would admire, at least personally. Um, so I kind of worked my way out of the airsoft arena, one kind of part-time job at a time. Keep doing Milsom West. We go from 4 games a year to 5 games a year, 6 games a year. Come 2014, we're like stepping up to 7 games a year. And now I'm paying more taxes on my airsoft money than my part-time janitor, part-time CrossFit coach money. Do you know what I mean? So it's like maybe I don't need to be a part-time this, part-time that, part-time that,
Mhm.
right? Maybe I could just be run this business. And so it's been since about 2014, so it's been 10 years solid of running this business. For the people who don't know what Milsom West is at all, it uses airsoft and blank fire. It's a 40-hour event using airsoft and blank fire to simulate a light infantry unit operating in a near peer conflict between Russia and NATO as infantrymen. It's 40 hours, no breaks. And, for each platoon of 40 clients who are portraying infantrymen, we hire somebody with the kind of experience that Zach has or that I have, or like, Marines, Rangers, Green Berets, some Navy guys, people from all branches of service, really with relevant experience to infantry or special operations to kind of guide that group through. And what I see Milsom West as now, back then, I just did it because I wanted my crew to play a 40-hour game. That was my interest in the hobby. Is I was like, all this stuff I know about rangering isn't really relevant in a 30-minute force on force on
Right.
a small course. Some of the things I know, like how to slice the pie and things like that, but the kind of tactical shooting you're going to learn isn't even necessarily what you want to learn to be a pro paintballer, right? Which is what airsoft is closer to. So initially, we were just making these games so that our team battle sim, which then became the Rushing Russians, right? Um, we just wanted a game that our team could play 40 hours at. because then I knew that all this stuff that I knew, we'd be able to use it to dunk on people with ambushes and get into a patrol base, right, and absolutely make their life miserable in a way that getting one or two more hits with a BB gun really can't. And so we started hosting those games. And the way I see the business now is it's a lot like Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Buffalo Bill, aka William F. Cody, was a really famous American in the 1870s, 1880s, turn of the century, who ran an arena show where they reenacted the Battle of Little Bighorn. And Buffalo Bill William Cody would play General Custer, and then he'd have Sitting Bull play Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse would play Crazy Horse. And they traveled all over the world doing the show because people wanted to see, and to be fair, Buffalo Bill himself was at the Battle of the Little Bighorn as a scout, so which is why he survived. So they wanted to see like the real cowboys, the real Indians, the real cavalry. People wanted to see him do shooting and roping and riding up close. And that's kind of what this is. People wonder what that 20-year span of honing a select group of young Americans into warriors, what does that look like up close? And if you're going to attend a Milsim West event, you're going to see that, because you're going to have one of those people come to you at 3 a.m, tell you to get your squad up and go perform an L-shaped ambush on a point target. You know what I mean? Send you out to do an L on a point at 3 a.m. And that's when you're really going to see our arena show, so to speak. So that's how I view the business now. It started as something as I did as a hobbyist to make a game I wanted to play in. And what I realize now is I just wanted to express to people like what that experience of being in an elite infantry unit was like. And since I'd done reenactment my whole life, even after the Army, I got involved in World War II reenacting, Vietnam reenacting. And a common question people would ask me in those communities when they found out that I had actual combat experience, which 20 years ago was relatively rare. Now, everybody assumes if you were in the military, you fought in Afghanistan or Iraq. It's like, it's even more so than Vietnam. We had a longer, better, I think it was the best war yet, longer, better, less casualties for us,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm very proud of the work we did. It's unfortunately that we've now officially lost in Afghanistan, because I really loved trolling boomers about how we were still winning in Iraq and Afghanistan and they had officially lost Vietnam. But oh well,
Can't win them
I
all.
guess that joke, yeah, maybe too spicy.
Nah, definitely not. I
But yeah,
mean,
that's the whole story. That's
yeah,
start to finish. Sorry, I kind of
no, that's perfect. I think that's what people are want to hear is just, the full story. I'm sure you talked about it elsewhere as well, but it seems like you were literally like typecasted and molded into someone that could only you or someone of your background could pull it off with your theater background, with the combat experience, with your
yeah.
interest in this.
And it's not that didn't even occur to me until I was like 35. I'm
Right.
42 now. Right. And then when I was like 35, I was like, oh, this isn't even an original idea. Milsim West is not, you're not the first person to say, let's show the citizens of Rome what the Carthage Wars looked like. Get some of these Carthaginian slaves in here. And right. I mean, people that want to see the spectacle and they want to see it live, you know. And so I'm just working in that same business, but I'm just very fortunate I'm basically a Nepo baby for this business, right? It's like my parents were basically born into it. They raised me in it. Um, I do look at Milsom West very much like an entertainment business because that is what it is. And when I try and explain my business to somebody on an airplane that I can tell isn't interested, I try to make it sound like it's a hike or a race or maybe a concert. You know what I mean? It's easier to just
It's
and
like
the basics are there.
like one of those it's like one of those Spartan races.
If I'll be like, yeah, yeah, it's like that. It's like a Tough Mudder, and they're like, oh, cool, okay. What's all the gun cases for? And I'm like, it has a few other
Guns.
elements. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. Well, bro, I live in Seattle, man. So actually,
Yeah.
the number of times that a Seattleite in the Seattle airport or on transit to will be like, what's in those cases? It's like, you fucking know. Only someone from the Northwest would be passive aggressive to a person they think is about to commit a mass shooting.
Yep.
Only here
Yep.
would someone be like, yeah, yeah. But you know, uh that's basically the whole story. So, I did this thing as kind of a hobby and a way to put my sort of ranger experiences into a hobby where I could kind of, I mean, I still think it's relevant. I still see some importance in maintaining basic proficiency with arms, but like when I was younger, I obviously thought it was way more important. Now that I'm like older and I realize I certainly will not die in battle, fingers crossed, but like seems very unlikely. Uh, I realized that maybe I could have spent some time on some other things. Like I've been successful with airsoft. Would have been cool if I got into finance 20 years ago, though. That would have been really cool. Not as interesting, certainly, but I wouldn't have to work as hard. Although I don't have to now because I have this wonderful team who you've already interviewed. And really, the strength of the business now is that it's an organization that mimics what the airsoft and milsim hobbies and reenactment hobbies did for me as a young veteran in the early 2000s when I was like kind of the only, I'm in my early 20s and I'm like talking. The only people I can really talk to veteran wise that I feel are my peers are like dudes who fought in Vietnam, right? Those are the only guys that really get it. Otherwise, they're just like, oh, my boots weren't shined once in Germany and I got scuffed up for it. It's like, okay, well, I don't.
Cool, bro.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like, battalion for the first 4 months I was there until we actually started going to war and then
Yeah.
everybody didn't care anymore. But
I mean,
cool,
that is
it's a cool
something
hobby.
I've
Go ahead.
appreciated, kind of playing off of the like the community. Coming out of regiment and kind of struggling with those same kind of identity and trying to figure out what the hell I want to do because it's like I don't want to go to college. I know, I mean, I could crush it if I wanted to, but it's just not something I really care about. Entrepreneurship and then just having, but I was missing the like being with the boys, like having someone that I can relate to who grew up in the same place, who had the same experiences I did, who has the same mindset of just hey, let's fucking crush it, whatever we're gonna do. So that's something the one game I've been out to, Silk Road Strife. That's something that I was like, damn, this feels like I'm back with the fucking boys again.
I mean, that is one of my favorite things about the gig and where the company has come to now. Because it used to be I really couldn't pay anybody well enough to make it worth anybody's time. You know what I mean? It was like the pay was so low, I really wasn't able to get super high quality people such as Nick Ryan, Sean Prosen, Justin Darrow, Max Hemke. I wasn't able to get people with that kind of background even interested in working for me. Luckily, it's gotten popular. It's really the only hardcore pretend to be in a war experience of all the paintball games, of all the reenactments, all the airsoft games out there. This is the one that it's like people go to it and they go, okay, this feels real,
Yeah.
right?
I
People
mean,
who
you
have
see
been in
you see
regiment,
footage and people
right?
assume, oh shit, that's Ukraine. And it's like, nah, it's just that they're out in freaking Georgia. They're at the
That's
Guardian
right.
Training Center in Georgia now.
But I enjoy it because we have the shared sense of purpose. We are doing rangerish things, with Marines, with Green Berets. We're all doing those things, but there's a real reason, right? We're not doing them just to see who's best at pretending to be a platoon sergeant. We're actually doing it in service of capitalism because we're all getting paid. Everybody who's working the game is going to get paid, and we're trying to give an experience to these people. So it's interesting to have a real reason to do the field work instead of just like, well, I'm the commander of green team, but it's like, right, but you know, most other war-based hobby organizations, all the commanders and the leadership are hobbyists themselves. So the juice for them is being like the general of the tin soldiers. But the juice, I think, for most good cadre and for myself is like putting on a good show for the people so that they go, oh, that's what the life of a recon marine is like, a ranger is like, this is what an infantryman does. And they get it, they feel it. They're like, oh, okay, I understand what these guys actually sacrifice. So I know what I'm thanking them for next time. Maybe I won't thank them quite so profusely, or whatever it is. Because I always feel weird when people are like, thank you for your service. And it's like, well, you know,
Like that Kermit meme, if you know what I'm talking about, where it's just Kermit like plowing Miss Piggy and like crying in the shower, shooting an AK and fucking doing blow. I don't know if you've seen that
no.
one, but it's like, thank you for your service, my service. I'll send it to you.
Well, I mean, it's always so weird. It can be kind of a weird, sometimes people, sometimes I've always thought in those situations, where it's somebody who's like, oh, everybody in my family served, but I never did, and I really respect service. Sometimes I want to be like, well, hey, man, I bet you if you tried it, you wouldn't worship us that much. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, I think if you carried a ruck around and got rained on for a weekend, you'd realize you could actually do those things. You just made other life choices. We're not better people than you for making different life choices. Service to the nation is definitely important, but like, you don't have to suck another grown man off for it at a bar. You can just be like, cool, man.
Cool.
You know, um,
So what are your, I
Yeah,
guess,
that's
long term, what's your, I guess, long term vision for Milsim West? How do you want to see it kind of continue to grow?
sure. I mean, basically, I think the long-term vision is to preserve the current quality of the organization we have, try and incrementally improve it, make small improvements, just to make games run a little smoother. I think we've achieved a lot of that with the staffing. Like we've managed to get a core group of staff that we make a full-time commitment to. They make a full-time commitment to us. We have like a full-time talent manager. We got a full-time operations manager. We have 6 core guys that do every single event for us. We commit to do hire them for every single event. That costs a little more just because we have to travel more people further, but the quality really reflects it. So I really just want to maintain that and really just keep growing. I mean, over the last 10 years, the business has grown an average of 28%, which is phenomenal.
It's pretty great.
If we can maintain over 10% growth for the next 10 years at where we're currently at, I will start thinking about quitting. And hopefully the guys who are now working for me will have been, some of them are already bringing in their own venues. So they get a piece of the business because they bring in a venue, they get ownership over that venue. We pay them a percentage that increases every year for taking ownership of that venue. And so my goal long term is to see the guys who are now my partners and associates own half or more of the book of business of this company in terms of the venue relationships and be able to hand it over to them. So, you know what I mean? In a way that, yeah, I mean, this is my career at this point. So I would like to be able to retire from it and leave it as the really, I mean, profit making machine, which is what it is at this point, um, for the guys that are there. Because it does two cool things. One, it's profitable because no one else does it. And it'd be very hard for anybody else to get into this business. There are many airsoft paintball reenactments that bill themselves as Milsim, but they don't spend the kind of money on staff that we do at Milsim West, and that shows. Um, and they don't spend money like we spend money to bring out the same people every time, even if we don't sell enough tickets for like on a smaller event, we'll still bring out the core 8 just to be sure that we retain those guys and that they can improve their work each event. You know, so yeah, that's just where I would see it. It's just steady incremental growth from where we're at. Probably, hopefully, add a couple more formats. I got a fresh new format I'm trying to get in next spring. It's a POW camp escape game. I think it's going to be rad. I think
You
you heard me
talk about
rap about
that.
it a little
Yeah.
bit.
Oh, it sounds
I'm
awesome.
hoping to see. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to see more formats come our way in the next 10 years. I'm hoping to see more cadre bring in their own book of business. You know, I that's really it. I mean, I'd like to do what my parents did and just pass that entertainment business off. You know what Bill Cody did? Pass it off to Annie Oakley and her husband Frank. And she kept it going all through the 20s, right? Up until World War II. Um, she was the big star for that show. So I mean, that's what I'd love to do is just preserve what I have, keep being the steward of his. Like I just realized maybe 6 years ago that I'm a business owner, not an airsofter, not a ranger.
It finally hit you.
I
You're,
don't.
oh shit.
Yeah. I'm an entertainment producer. That's what I do. Right. I find a venue. I find talent. I market it. I put them together. That is my job. Those are my core competencies. It's interesting because I have to know like infantry doctrinal information to do my core competencies. Otherwise, the event won't make any sense.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's interesting to be like a fat middle-aged guy that still has to retain these competencies who is not in the military and isn't a hopelessly lost hobbyist. Although I am a hopelessly lost hobbyist, but like it's also my job. Um, and like you said, it's like the time with the boys, but we have this common mission. It's not like we all just went out to the woods to like woosah and feel better about ourselves or something.
Yeah. You're
Yeah,
actually
it's
doing
like
something productive and, something challenging to a degree, you know.
I mean, it's challenging in the sense that you have to be outside in the elements. You have to walk around with the guys. You got to ruck,
Hmm.
but like that's not necessarily the challenging part. The challenging part is like listening to this guy for the fifth time tonight, where it's like,
Bitch about
all right, do
something.
you want to go home or are you staying? Like, listen, man, I don't have any more tubs. Should I call you a ride? Are you gonna walk out of here? No, you're gonna keep talking. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful that I've gotten to this position with this business. It was totally on accident. I think from a business perspective, I would definitely say there's a lot of people out there that are like, you can do business, you can make a business too, you can 10x yourself. I don't know if that's actually true. Do you know what I mean? Maybe in real estate, maybe in jewelry, maybe in a certain number of businesses. Sure, you can run a functioning business. You know, I feel like there's a lot of some people might feel a lot of pressure when it comes to entrepreneurial stuff to come up with your totally own idea, right? And a lot of people, like family members of mine, for a long time looked at me that way and were like, "No, but you've come up with something totally different." And I thought that about myself for a long time, but it took me a while to realize like I didn't come up with something totally different. What I did was I found a niche that nobody else was in with the right experience, and I filled that with the right experience. Because some of the first games I went to were like old line claws, airsoft games. If people knows what that is,
Yeah, I
I
remember.
went to other games. Okay, I saw what was happening, and I was like, well, none of these motherfuckers have a ranger tab. No one here has ever been a team leader in regiment. You know what I mean? Like, no one here is the enlisted honor graduate. Like I was like, I can do this. And my parents had basically trained me from birth, like, be loud, be confident, make sure everybody hears you when you're on stage, look everybody in the eye while you're talking to them. We were kind of rapping about this before the cast. A lot of the stuff my folks taught me about how to be an effective public speaker or a good dramatic performer is like what you need to do to get people to buy in with you in the military when you're trying to brief 50 or 100 people or I mean, I deal with bigger groups obviously on the civilian side. I was a team leader, but like um that's always been a great advantage for me. That I'm grateful to my parents for training me from a very young age, and not realizing how important that was until later. Because I think quite often in the military, leadership is like yelling at people and knife handing. And I think if you can tell a story, tell a joke, make an impassioned request, like all three of those things are better ways of trying to get people on your side for the mission than be like, hey, fucker.
There
Now, it's nice to be,
time and place for that, but it's not very often.
no, well, what I enjoyed most about the change in regiment was that I felt like leadership over the course of the 4 years I was there went from, hey, fucker, which is useful. You need that in an organization like that. Like, I shouldn't have to emotionally explain to you why you got to be the one man in the door. You should just do it. And we shouldn't have to have like a hug circle about how you might die first. You know what I mean? Like, I should just be able to be like, hey, fucker, you're first, right? And that's it. Um, but it makes it easier for people to do that if at other times you have other ways of asking or inspiring in the toolbox. And that was what I learned the most from that. And that's what helps me the most. I don't a fuck or anybody at Milsim West other than a misbehaving client. I
Yep.
don't go to my client, my cadre. I wouldn't talk to them. Like I don't talk to my cadre like they're my fucking subordinates in the army. These guys are free agents. I need them. You know what I
Right.
mean? Otherwise, I got to get my fat ass walking up and down a hill with a rope, and that's not inspiring for anybody. Would you rather have Nick Ryan as your cadre or fucking me? You know what I mean? Like that's a fact. You'd rather have Justin Darrow out there or me? That's not hard. So one of my favorite parts about the job keeps me on a mission with the dudes, and I get to work with all kind of young Rangers, young Marines, getting out, having the same experience, searching for identity, trying to find a place where the skills that they had that helped them shine in the military can be noticed. And when we're doing Milsim West events, that is a great place for anybody who misses that community and misses a place for you know those skills that they've learned, whether it's as a client, whether it's as cadre working for me. um I think that's what motivates me the most about it. And I actually don't have any hobbies. You know what I mean? Like my hobbies are like a little fishing, a little camping, things I wouldn't consider necessarily a hobby. Like I just go into nature for some peace and solitude, and that's it. I don't really need to get away. It's like I don't have to be like, honey, to my wife, like, oh, I got to go away for a boys' weekend. It's like I do that
It's your
13
job.
times a year. Yeah, well, because the Sunday night party, when you're done being staff at a Milsom West on Sunday night, everybody's like relaxed. Everybody's whatever was happening Saturday night, where it was like, I'm going as fast as I can, Steven. Like all that is gone. Everybody's just trying to kick back and
Tell some war
feel good
stories.
about the accomplishment. Yeah, talk about whatever they got to talk about, that happen. I mean, most of my work now, I'm not even a cadre anymore, right? It's like this other clique of guys who are now the primary infield entertainers at Milsom West. And my job is mostly making sure they get traveled there in a way that's comfortable to them, making sure that they have the resources they need or they are picked up and transported from the airport to suitable lodging where they are fed nice food and drink and smoke. right? And can relax before the game, prepare their equipment, and tell me any concerns they might have going into the work. Then I spend Friday moving around the site with them, making sure we all understand where everything is. You know what I mean? And then during the middle of the game, I'm just kind of chilling, right? I mean, I do my public speaking Friday. I let everybody know the rules and the safety stuff. I do my little public speaking, right, for an hour for each side. And then I'm basically chilling. I'm only dealing with the people dropping out until the game's over. And then, the last part of my work, which is important, is make sure that everybody who works for me gets accommodated comfortably and gets fed the way they want and feels heard no matter how long that takes. So if I have to stay up and party with the guys till 3 in the morning, that's just what I got to do. And sometimes that's fun, you know what I mean? But sometimes it's like,
Come
oh
on.
man, I'm flying. Like I got to fly back tomorrow morning. I got family shit going on. And I'm going to get off the plane. My wife's going to pick me up. We're going straight to my parents' house. I was up until 4 a.m. drinking with the guys, listening to them complain about the same customer all night, like well past the point where I wanted to say, well, can you guys just get over it? But I don't want to say that because they work for me. I'm supposed to be, if you can't tell me about your frustrations with the job, then who can you tell?
Right.
Like, yeah, your significant other doesn't care. They're probably not going to get it because they're going to be like, why do you hang out with this fat idiot on the mountain if you hate him so much? It's like, well, Mr. Warren made me, you know. So I get a lot of other jobs, and I feel very fortunate that it keeps me in contact with young Rangers and shows me how much Regiment has changed. Because guys are getting out now, that are super studly, that are super knowledgeable, that have tons of combat deployment experience, you know. And it's not that we didn't train hard then or we weren't getting a lot of interesting technical skills. Like I got taught aircraft ground crew stuff. I got taught some firefighting, all these things that we learned to do the airfield seizure mission. Some of that stuff was really cool. Learned a lot of really useful medical stuff, certainly, that's helped me still today when people have emergencies at Milsim West. But it just, it seems like it's a harder regiment to get through. Now, maybe I'm mistaken, but it's like RIP's longer. RIP is more technical. But fuck, the RPAT is like way harder than the old PT test, if you ask me.
Really?
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I mean, I think that they changed it. I think one of the reasons they changed it because you mentioned, you showed up to 275 and you're like, oh shit, I haven't shot a gun since basic. And it's like the reality of regiment now, it's like we've had a dude show up. This was for one of our blowouts. It's like you can literally deploy as soon as you show up and be going on a
Right.
mission with the guys. So it's like we need to have everyone at that core level of competency, to do maybe a little bit of CQB, to be able to shoot the rifle effectively, to be able to be a ranger first responder if needed, because you can literally sign for your RIF issue and deploy within a week if you shown up to battalion. It happened to I've told the story before. He showed up, former Navy guy, and he showed up like right before Christmas, and then we got blown out in the early days of 2020, and the old boy didn't even have an op score yet. Like RIF was out of op scores at the time, and so he had to take an ACH, and he's like barely even in process. Like I don't think he had all his paperwork done, and he's overseas with us. And it was like if shit went super south, which we were kind of either hoping it did or hoping it didn't, he would have been right in the stack with us. And it's like that's kind of I think that they realized that when they did make the switch from 3 to 8 weeks, they're like, oh shit, like guys are getting on deployments fresh out of this selection. They need to be at least an asset to the team. They might be
It was
going to
definitely a
replace.
recurring. I mean, that was a recurring problem we had was that
Yeah.
privates would show up and we'd be like, "Fuck, dude, we're deploying in like a month.
Hmm.
What are we going to teach? What are we going to have to teach this guy in a month?" Um, and so I am almost certain that's why they made the switch, and I think it was a good one,
For
obviously,
sure. For
because
sure.
it's like I said, my first demo range was literally my second week in bat, and like I'd never touched fucking demo, and someone
Let
was like, "Go build a wall charge," and I was like, "Fuck, dude,"
me get the boat.
I mean, right. I mean, somebody talked me through it, but it definitely was like, wow, okay. Um, it's cool. It's cool to see how it's changed. And I often think sometimes that I get some free respect from the younger guys, that I'm not, like I told you, my first couple deployments, man, we didn't do shit. I have 5 deployments, but really only two of them are similar to what modern Rangers from the last 10 years, from I'd say 2010 onward, from the Obama war forward, like that's right. That's when Ranger Regiment is really kind of sharpened itself into what it is today, which I think is I honestly think it's a more elite organization than it was 20 years ago. Not that it wasn't, not that it's super substantially different, but
I mean,
I
20
think
years of
that there's more
warfighting
tech.
through that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Learn how
yeah,
to where to
absolutely.
cut the dross per se, and kind of focus
Something
and
like that.
be able to expand, I guess, your core competencies and really, get good at that specific set of stuff that you're going to be doing. Um, but yeah, no, freaking, we've gone about an hour and 15. We,
Okay, cool, man.
yeah, I think parting thoughts, I guess, I always kind of ask because, kind of my platform and my channel, and I do get a lot of dudes that are joining. So, and I have, that was one of the cool things too about being out there was, a couple of the Russian kids that I was hanging out with, they're like, oh yeah, I'm, gonna be joining the army here soon. And it's like, cool. It's like, they've been able to talk to Nick and Sean, and it's like, I like to the part of the reason I started the channel is kind of mentor, dudes who are on that path to end up in a regiment. Because there wasn't a whole lot of that when you joined for sure. And even when I joined
No,
in
not at all.
2018, like it was like books, like I grew up reading, old books about Rangers and stuff. And it was like, that's kind of what inspired me. And then there was like a forum, like one forum I think it was like Army Ranger Forum or something. I don't even remember, but it was that and like the recruiting videos and like the fucking the Ranger School promos and shit. Like that was the extent of maybe a few, History Channel like Inside RASP or Ranger School. And that was it.
There's
There
some
was no
literature. My buddy Jim Hansen, who's one of our full-time cadre, I think his RIP class, no, his Ranger School class got covered on one of those.
okay, yeah.
Um, but there wasn't as much. I mean, you actually should have this guy, Austin Garber, one of our cadre, is a squad leader at third bat, and he has been coming to Milsom West since he was 15
Hmm.
with Jim Hansen and a bunch of the guys. And he's done a bunch of stuff in the army. He was in the old guard, then he went to regiment from the old guard. Now he's a squad leader there, and he still does cadre work for us whenever he can. And he is a really interesting dude. And Milsom West is definitely Milsom West and Rushing Russians together are definitely like a mentorship towards special operations service thing. We'd never really say that, but there's so many dudes at the top who have that experience, um, that I think it kind of attracts younger guys who are interested in that and getting mentorship focused towards that, or realizing that maybe it's not for them after
Yeah.
all, right? But at least figuring it out and having a good set of people around to kind of give them that perspective, which is not something I had. I mean, basically, all I really got was from my dad, who just kind of said, "Well, that's what I thought I was supposed to do," so I went and did it. And his dad, who basically was like, "Well, the Japanese and the Germans attacked us, so we had to do it." You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like they would not. I might never saw my dad wear any. My dad, my grandpa never sported like the hat, never had the bumper sticker. They just went about their lives. Never really brought it up. I mean, I talk about it way more than they did, but I mean, I was in Ranger Regiment, which is a little bit different. Uh, it's like going to Harvard or something. You got to fucking tell everybody.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
so
I guess what
my
would be
sister went to
your
Harvard, so
I guess your advice to both people that want to come out to
to
Milsim West and then people, I guess, that do are looking at the path of specifically, I guess, special operations.
sure. I mean, I think it's actually the same answer in both cases. I think that there's no secret. You just do it. You just get up every day and you keep deciding to do it every day. And if you need to bargain with yourself about quitting, tell yourself that you'll wait till tomorrow morning to decide. That's what I do. That's honestly how I did it. I just said, well, if I quit today, then they get a freebie on me. Maybe I can always decide to quit tomorrow morning. And I would just keep trying to put that off because there were definitely times when I did want to quit. Um, so, you're considering a career in special operations. I'd say don't wait. It's easier to do it while you're younger. Um, don't think about it too much because if you think about doing ranger work too much, you're going to go crazy. Because a lot of it is just monotonous physical labor or monotonous like standing or walking, looking, waiting to shoot something. I mean, most of it's waiting, really.
Hmm.
Um, and if you think it's going to make you everything to everybody, don't be disappointed when you find out later that it's not. So I think maybe something that people that I never heard anyone who'd been through that experience tell me before was like, hey man, I still had struggles after this. I still had failures after this in life. This didn't make me, you know what I mean? This wasn't like, it's more like a high school letter jacket, you know, if you let it be that or something like that. But I mean, it's pretty, that's it. Don't quit. That's the secret. There is no secret. The secret is don't quit and do it. Otherwise, you're going to regret it. And there's no way to measure how much you're going to regret it. There's no top 5 tips. You know, you just have to go and do it with reckless abandon. And, you know, you either have it or you don't. And when you're either done with it or you don't make the cut, you got to put it down so you can go on with your life. You know, something I try and explain to other rangers all the time is I try and think of it like that didn't make me somebody I wasn't. I was that person. And then they like polished me. Do you know what I mean? Like I was already a diamond. They just the regiment like scrubbed away the coal for me and saw what it was. So whether I had ever achieved that in regiment or not, I'm still the same guy. I should still value myself the same way. You know, a little piece of cloth that says I'm part of this thing doesn't make me any better or less good. You know, doesn't make me better or worse than anything. It is what I decide to do on the day. That's it, right? You know, because obviously you can have a best day or a worst day, right? You're not guaranteed to always be good because you're a ranger. It's something you have to strive at every day. So same thing. And if you want to try Milsim West, same thing applies. You know what I mean? There is no like in between. Just go out and do it. If you're worried about the physicality of the game, as far as like the rucking in the force on force game format, seek out an insurgency game. That's going to be a little easier. You can play a civilian. You won't be expected to, move your ruck around all the time. It's not going to be as physically strenuous, and so that would be my advice. But if you are somebody who wants to serve our nation and you are interested in being in battle, then you should definitely try to serve in the 75th Ranger Regiment and just don't question it. Just do it. I mean, honestly, if I would have thought too long and hard on 9/12 about exactly what I was continuing to volunteer for, man, I wouldn't be here, and I'd probably have a lot of regrets. And somebody else would be running Milsim West, and I'd be a customer working some other jobs so I could have money to have a hobby, to think about what it might have been like if I'd gone a different way. So, you know, uh, you got to do like Nike says, and just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hell yeah. Those are wise words, especially I appreciate the part for the former Ranger stuff as someone who's, recently been out and still struggling to kind of find that identity and letting go of the past and not getting sad when I'm, drinking with the boys and we watch Ranger edits on YouTube.
Well, you should come out and work with us, man. I know I've
I
asked you
mean,
before. You should
that's what
definitely
that's what we're
consider
going
it.
to talk about here once
Okay.
we wrap up. I want to ask a few questions.
Okay. Cool.
But
Yeah. Absolutely.
Josh, thanks for coming on. Hope to see you in the near future again, and bring you back on the podcast. Maybe talk more specific Milsim West stuff and kind of just the craziness and maybe the lore, some of the lore behind rushing Russians. I think that
Sure, it'd be fun to get maybe like all the
like a
we could get
group.
some we could do a yeah, get like a bunch of Rangers, maybe one Marine. I know it's a Ranger podcast, but like, you
I'm
know,
I'm not
uh
discriminatory.
no, yeah, what you'll find is there are friends. Everybody thinks we're the same people anyway.
Yep.
Right. The people who don't get it think we're all the same persons. So, so what I mean is my other Ranger buddies. That's what I call the Marines in Milsim West. Because Marines are basically
The
Rangers,
others.
at least for Milsim purposes. So, yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk about my business and my own background.
Yeah,
Obviously, I appreciate it.
this is great, and appreciate everyone for tuning in this far. And we will catch you all on the flip side.